Our agenda, we're going to first cover preparing for 2020, which is fiscal calendars, fixed assets updates. Then we're going to go into closing 2019, and then some general health checks, more or less time on that, depending on how fast we move through the other areas. Then we hope to have time for questions and answers. And by the way, before we switch slides, I know for numbers of people it's hard to look at 2020 before looking at 2019. It's out of order, but you're actually going to be getting ready for 2020 before you start closing 2019.
All right, thanks, Becky. So I'm going to start here with the general ledger setup for 2020. So before you set up your fiscal calendar, you should review the setups in your module options. I'm going to go ahead and I'll be bouncing around from the slide to Sage 500. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of the options screens. I'm going to open up both IM options and the AP options. And then I'm also going to open up the fiscal calendar here. Okay, so lots of screens open. And let's take a look at 2020. So looking at 2020, you can see that I have the full year here. And then there's various check boxes down the columns except for inventory management. So one of the things I wanted to point out is there's this option in your options, in your module options, and I'm looking at AP here and IM. It's called the closing or creating periods. And there's a checkbox in each of these. So I have it over here on this side and over here on this side. It gives you an option to either unlock all future periods or to unselect that, which would therefore lock all future periods. If you choose to unlock them all, you can set a certain amount of numbers to unlock when you're creating the fiscal year or when you're closing the previous year or period. So based on the settings that I have now, IM is going to remain unlocked for 2020 while AP is going to be locked. So that's kind of a newer feature that's out there, and you have that option and flexibility. So let's also take a look at the dates. Oh, also just to point out, next year is a leap year, so you'll see February 29th. Let's go ahead and close out of here. So how soon do you need to have your how soon do you need to set up your 2020? Basically, you don't want to set it up too soon in advance. You don't want people making errors, entering transactions far in the future. So just be aware this would be one of the steps that you want to do during your year-end closing, and just prepare that step. Okay. Inventory calendar, so that is a separate calendar. If you use the IM module, you will want to take a look at setting this one up as well. It sometimes gets forgotten at the beginning of the year. I will say I do get a lot of calls on where that calendar lives because it's kind of buried. So for that one, it's actually in the IM options on the miscellaneous tab, and you just find the little button. So this is going to actually open up always with the current year, and as you can see, this is grayed out, so you can't really click on it. All you have to do to get into the new year is cancel, and if you're going to create the new year, I already created it, but you would just hand type it in, and you can copy from previous years. Again, we've got our our leap year here. So generally this calendar is going to follow a regular calendar year, and then your work days is really for IR and replenishment. So if you're not using that, you don't really need to worry about that too much. Okay, so if you come into this screen, we have in the past seen where someone will create the new the new inventory calendar, and it does take some time. We definitely recommend to run it after hours. If it's going painfully slow, then let us know, give us a call, and we can go ahead and do that in the back-end tables for you. And then also just a quick note about Sage Fixed Assets. They do come out with a new version every year. That version is going to include all of the changes that are made to the IRS depreciation rules. So you'll want to make sure that if you're using fixed assets that you get that new copy. And just a note about that one is you can't jump over versions, so you'll have to install every version. They're not cumulative. So if you're still back on 2018, you'll have to get 2019 and 2020 once that's released. Okay, so let's move along to physical inventory. Again, I'm probably going to bounce over to Sage. Let's just take a look at the agenda here. We're going to talk about like weekend coverage, end of year. I don't know about you guys, but if you have an inventory, it's like, it seems that everyone will do their year-end full-blown inventory right at the end of the year, and it can be kind of painful. So hopefully I'll give you some tips that'll make it a little less painful. But it is usually a big deal, especially if you don't do cycle counts throughout the year. But I'm going to go ahead and pop back open to Sage. And let's open Process Physical Inventory. So here I actually pre-created a batch for the Vernon warehouse. So one of the things I want to point out here is that it is based on a warehouse. You can actually have multiple batches, and you can kind of chop up that warehouse however you see as fit and what makes sense to your the freeze date. So you can go ahead and create your batch, but you want to hold off on freezing that batch until right at the last moment that you're ready to start counting. And the reason for that is because Sage still allows you to create transactions in the system, but then you'll have to reconcile those transactions back to your physical count, and it can get a little overwhelming, I guess, if you have a lot of shipments going out or inventory coming in after the freeze happens. So try to keep that kind of to the last, to like the end of the day before you start your counting, especially if you're doing a second shift counting. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Show Frozen Quantities, and I'm going to come into the Enter Counts. So this screen here allows you to use these filters to pull in the data in the bottom half of the screen. Now you have the regular filters over here, but this one's going to kind of give you like the big picture of what's been counted. If there's nothing counted, it won't show up. What's been uncounted, which is everything in my batch right now, or both. So it allows you to apply those filters. This feature right here, the set uncounted to 0, that allows you to skip over anything in the count quantity and just set it to 0. So it will do a mass set to 0 for those items. So kind of be careful with that, but it's also a great feature in just setting everything instead of having to type in the zeros. But I'm going to show you actually something even better. So if you are a Data Porter user, you should definitely use Data Porter with entering your cycle counts. Even if you don't own Data Porter, you can still export this list to a Excel spreadsheet just like that. So it's pretty simple. I had set the show frozen quantities on the front of the batch, and now I can see them kind of in my master list here. This is going to give you a good visual of any discrepancies while the counting is going on or while you're entering the count data in the screen. So it's pretty nice. And then it also gives you the bins, the lots, and cereal. So this was just a straight export. So as you get those counts into your export here, it becomes a really nice way to get it back into the count screen using Data Porter. So I'm going to show you guys that. And again, if you don't use Data Porter or you don't own it, it's definitely something you'll want to get a demo on. You just come over to the add-ins, and I'm just going to pull that open. Now, hopefully you would have a template already created, which I do. So now this is kind of like the same screen here, but I'm going to come back to my control. So I've already dropped in my counts, and all you would have to do is click on the import, and everything just goes in seamlessly. And this is why we love Data Porter. Right, Becky? So here we could see our counted and uncounted is now gone. So as simple as that. Let's see, what else did I want to talk? I think actually I covered everything on the Data Porter screen. Again, if you guys are planning to do a physical count over a weekend, let us know, give us a heads up if you need somebody from RKL on standby. We've done that in the past for our customers, and it might just be that peace of mind that you need so that you can get that count done. And if you have any questions, then you can reach out to us. All right. So missing count cards, oh, that's right, I did want to bring that up. So if we come back to the screen, if you do have missing count cards, there are reports built in. Although the enter count screen I think is sufficient enough to find out like what's missing between the counted and uncounted. There are reports, and these are kind of older reports that were in the system before that nice new view. But you can get that in report version. The reconciliation report, that's going to give you, oh gosh, I always have to look at this. The reconciliation report is the one that's going to tell you what has shipped out after you froze. And then the discrepancy report is actually based on a percentage that's set up in the maintain inventory screen. If your count is different from your freeze amount, it's going to tell you in this report based on the percentage allowed, if that makes any sense. Most people have it set to 0, so if it is set to 0 and you have a difference between your freeze count and your freeze quantity and your count quantity, it will definitely come up in that report. It's probably the easier way to say it. And then there's also some Explorer views. There's the pending physical counts. Again, you should see those on your menu if you have, I think, 7.5 or later. They are displaying at the bin, lot, and serial level, although we have built quite a few new versions. If you need one of those, maybe summarized by dollar amount, reach out to us and we will let you know if we already have something built that we can get that over to you for probably for a small fee. So let's go ahead and move on. Oh, so I'm going to actually pass this over to Becky, and she's going to talk to you about 1099.
Okay. Just to emphasize again, There's a nice Explorer for pending physical counts. There's also one for posted, but it's like the bin number serial item level, and you can summarize. But what we do is we put out an Explorer that's already summarized, so you can look and say, okay, there are discrepancies, but it's only in that it won't show up as a discrepancy if the quantity is still on hand. It's just in the wrong bin, or not the bin that was there. So anyhow, so moving on to other preparations, we're going to go ahead and talk about 1099s. This is going to be a lot of talk versus showing things, but there's some pretty important stuff we're covering here. And I'm sure everybody's really excited about 1099s. Okay, on the good news side, there are no changes to the 1099 forms this year. Forms, boxes, numbers, everything's the same. So if you could run them last year, you should be able to run them this year. A heads up, as long as we're talking, this is future, but as of next year, they are talking about having a totally new form called 1099-NEC, or non-employee compensation. The idea of it is that we've got that 1099 miscellaneous box 7 that has a different due date for those familiar with this area. It's due January 31st. And since all the other boxes are due February 28th, they decided let's go ahead and put it on a totally new form to be a different due date. So not certain, that's a year away, but very likely to be happening. Okay, so you want to be getting ready sooner rather than later on the 1099 forms. And they are out already. You can go to your local office supply store or order online. Please pick up lots of forms, extra forms, allow for errors because things go in wrong, things get printed wrong, and then you don't want to be the person at 4 o'clock on January 31st scouring the local office supply, hoping the forms are there. The other thing about 1099s is if you just do a few of them, you're just doing 10 of them. Some people don't have a lot of them depending on the sort of business they're doing. You can just go to the IRS website. You can order 3-part, 4-part forms. They're free. They just ship them to you real quick. You can take your Bic pen, you can fill them out, everything's done. So if you don't have to make a big project of it if it's not a big project for your company. Okay, but if you're running more, hopefully you are on a Sage 500 version that has the new Atrix cloud service. I'm hoping a lot of people are on to that. Okay, so if you're doing that, and if you want to, you don't have to print them yourselves. The Atrix also has a, yep, there we go, current pricing pop-up. Oh, it was there and it disappeared. What happened? There we go.
It's there.
It's coming up.
It's not there.
Okay, that was strange. Yeah, try reopening. Anyhow, I'm trying to get a specific. It looks like it's about $2.29 to have full service from them. Might be better than that. $2.29 per form. And you start taking off the time for people to go order the forms, print the forms, deal with the printers, because who knows if the printers are all lined up correctly. Reprint stuff envelopes, and then you're adding on top of that the first class postage to get them mailed. People are kind of moving over to the let Atrix do it. That is what they do. What is your time worth? What's your employees' time worth? And you have better things to be doing. So we have some blogs online about Atrix integration. And I was talking about printing, which is optional, but if you're using the Atrix services and you are paying maintenance, then you are automatically get free electronic filing at the federal level. At the state level, you have to be like gold, but I expect they don't charge much for that anyhow. And if you're not on Atrix yet, there are other online printing services that basically do it all. You know, you can upload an Explorer view of anything into Excel that shows your vendors' addresses, the box number and dollar amount, and they can do the process for you. So, okay, next slide, please.
Okay.
So deadlines, bright red. Okay, so if you were doing 1099 miscellaneous, box 7, the non-employee compensation, which is probably one of the most common ones, it is due January 31st, 2020. And that is not just to the vendors, but file it with the 1096 and send it on to onto the IRS. So vendor and IRS. The other forms you have till February 28th. Oops, that's supposed to say 2020. I didn't get that one updated. But no, it's not February 29th. They really do say February 28th, 2020 to be with the IRS. And more reason to get this right now. It's $50 per form if you pay late, if you file it late but within 30 days, and it goes way up from there. Very, very expensive to not get your, there we go, up to $550 with maximums of like $500,000. Not that we're likely to have that many $50, that many 1099s. You have to be a pretty big company, but still. Okay, there is a possibility of getting an extension. It's an IRS Form 8809, application for extension. And Jen, if you can pop that one up. It's out there, but kind of small print, but if you go down there, oh yeah, she's going to get it down, perfect. In the middle, if you are requesting an extension of the 1099 miscellaneous non-employee compensation, you've got to check off a box that says, I'm in a federal disaster zone and I've had fires or death, serious illness, or unavoidable absence of individuals. Yeah, you don't want to file the extensions for the 1099 non-employee compensations. You just want to get those out. IRS is not nice about this. They want their money. Okay, and don't forget too, if you're getting up there on the number, 250 plus returns of any one form, you have to do the electronic filing. Of course, you're using Atrix or a service, you're just going to have it happen automatically. But you can't, it used to be that Sage 500 would create the appropriate file. Of course, then you still had to apply in advance and go through various hoops to be able to file electronically. But now, since you're doing it through the service just does it, you're done with it. So, okay, we have yet another 1099 screen, reviewing payments. And you probably want to start doing this, let's do this before January 30th, maybe even before January 15th. Take a look through there. You want to make sure that you have all of your taxpayer identification numbers for your vendors, that you have W-9s, that especially if you have a new vendor, that all of the amounts that are showing as paid to them are marked as 1099 payments, if that's the case. Okay, and there are standard reports. There's a vendor 1099 activity report. It will show you everything in the 1099 activity report that you're reporting, but it also doesn't tell you what you are not reporting. So the situation of 1099s getting turned on partway through the year, that doesn't really pick it up. Explore vendors, you can look at last payments. If you like your explorers, you can look at the vendor payments explorers. And those are probably enough if you don't have a lot of vendor payments to review or feel like everything's real under control. For people who have decided that they need to do a much more thorough review, we also have built some, and RKL can supply you with, like a couple $100, not a big deal. Some custom 1099 explorers, like we have one that shows for every vendor. You can select by active, inactive. It's going to show you whether they are marked as needing 1099, if they have the Social Security number showing up. Currently, we don't have it masked secure Social Security number, but we could definitely change it so it's masked. I'm trying to say masked here. So you can select by that, and it will show you for the last three, running last 3 years, what were the total payments to that vendor. So you could select, I only care about payments totaling over $600 this year or last year, and also how much is already currently marked as 1099. So where you have a situation where you need deep analysis, we've got the tools to help you with that. And talking about that, this year they are pushing more and more to print the 1099s, and you can have the choice with Atrix printing them masked. So when the copy that you send to the vendor only has the last 4 digits showing. Recommend that. People are getting much more touchy about having their Social Security number sitting on a piece of paper in their mailbox. So, okie dokie. So lots of tools for reviewing. And one more here. So credit cards, you're going, okay, 1099s and credit cards what are we confusing here? Now, it's an important thing about 1099s is back in 2011, the IRS made it pretty clear that if you have paid your vendor via a credit card or PayPal or another third-party processor, you are not supposed to be doing a 1099 because the credit card company is going to be sending a 1099. So it would be a duplication. So there's been a fair amount of confusion, but everything I can see out there says that you want to get rid of this whole processing of 1099s or cut down on the amount of it, then you pay your vendors by credit card or PayPal. Because that moves the responsibility for the 1099 processing off of your area. And it makes for some weird gaps. That's why people aren't too comfortable, because the form that the 1099K that comes from a credit card issuer is also doesn't have to be sent out until it's $20,000 or 200 transactions. Actually, I think it's and 200 transactions. So it's kind of a gap on their reporting, but everything that people are reading says, yeah, you pay via credit card, you're done with your 1099. And version 7.9, which is also known as version 2018, of Sage 500 has a credit card vendor credit card payment method set up in it. If you are on an earlier version, shoot an email to support. We have, or we might even have a blog on it, because there are ways to set up a credit card payment type in AP. So basically what happens is you set up a bank, it's your Amex card, it's always going to be negative. You pay them, quote, pay them through that. You don't have to cut a check. And then you can have a bank reconciliation to clear all your credit cards, make sure everything's going. So anyhow, yeah, other thing is, IRS has a TIN matching service for your 1099s, but I'd love to hear if anybody is actually having to use that. What I'm picking up is it's basically if you have to do backup withholding and probably banks and financial services. So there'd be a lot of those. Anyhow, you may have some questions on those. We will definitely open up for 1099 questions at the end. But for now, if you we want to switch back over to some general health checks. And I'm going to pass it to Jen now.
All right, thanks, Becky. So disaster recovery plans, not something you probably want to think about, but just like any accident on the freeway or that happens, it's a way of life. So we want to make sure that we're preparing for anything like that, and also that you have a good system for if you need to run into some type of recovery plan. So you want to make sure that you update any emergency contacts, you know who to contact if you need to restore from backup. Something like that might be you accidentally purge data. You don't want to go forward and continue with your day even though knowing that you purged data. I mean, you want to stop right there and say, okay, what just happened? Do I need to restore from a backup? So know those emergency contacts and make sure you know how quickly to get a hold of them. Updating the checklist, including who. So you want to make sure that you know who to contact to validate the data. So also if you don't have an infrastructure team or an outsourced team for your backup and recovery, give us a call, let us know, because we could definitely come up with a plan that's right for your company. Also with SQL considerations, you want to make sure that you test your backup and recovery procedures. You don't want to wait until it's too late and go, oh, cross my fingers, I hope that my backup has been working and that I know how to recover this. So again, more of an IT staff function, but just make sure that you've got that covered. That might be through an off-site company where they do your backups for you. But if they're doing backups for you, and they might only be doing them once a day, so maybe check and find out that you have something happening, like some sort of log backup, transactional log backup that's happening like every hour throughout the day. That way, if you have to restore, you don't lose a full days of work. You might only lose like an hour or a couple hours. Know where your SQL install and your Sage install media is, your product keys. Those can be found, the product keys specifically can be found in maintain site in Sage. But Sage, on their knowledge base, they only have the versions of the Sage client and the Sage database utilities that they support. So if you're on an older version, it's likely that they won't have those download links for you. So you're going to want to make sure that you have that in a safe place. Also, RKL does keep the versions, and that way if you need one of those that goes back further, you can contact us and we can get that over to you. Of course, it's always easier if you've got them in a safe place. And then passwords and encryption keys, those, again, those are also, if you do a restore and you use credit cards, you'll need to restore your database master key and your encryption key. So you'll want to make sure that those are backed up somewhere safely on a drive that's not, you know, going to, you want to have it maybe like in multiple places so that you can get back to it. Again, those are generally something that are forgotten, and then when it comes to the time that you need it, it's just, you're kind of scrambling. So you don't want to lose all your customers' credit cards. Otherwise, those will have to get keyed back in. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about hiding data. So I've seen this quite often going on site with customers or logging into their systems. They'll open up screens in Sage and there's just so much data. It takes a long time to load. It can get frustrating, especially when you're opening up like the sales order screen and it loads to the max, or customers. Especially the customers, especially people who have a retail type business and they have a web interface, and new customers get created like guest customers, and so all those customers become throwaway customers. Your customer list becomes like absolutely huge and unmanageable. So there's ways that you can actually hide that data so it doesn't load, and it makes the user experience a lot better. And that goes for pretty much any type of entry form. As you see here, we've got GL accounts, customers, vendors, and items. Work with your filters, and then also this vendor performance report. I want to talk about that because that was actually a really interesting report. So let me pop this one open. And actually, after going through this one, I want to call it like, it's called a performance report, but I'd actually like to call it like a report card to your vendor. So it's really, you know, data is only good as you enter it, but you can see your vendors' on-time percentages. So this is like a scorecard that you can run from the past year and show to your vendor and say, hey, you know, you guys did a really bad job here. You know, how are you planning on improving that? Or maybe you can just ditch the vendor over, you know, you find out like, oh, there's a better vendor that's going to replace them. So also there's comments. Now this is actually a comment that you can enter in the receipt of goods field. So report's only as good as what you've entered in the system. If there was a situation to where a receipt of goods was just such a bad experience and they enter that, you can see it here when you run the report. So encourage receiving to put in notes. I mean, maybe not so gnarly, maybe a little bit nicer, I don't know. They will be seen, the notes will be seen on this report. But again, it's a good way to see overall how you can work with your vendor to either get better pricing, better discounts, or just, you know, how they're doing overall. So it's a great report. And then let me come back to the presentation. Data Porter. Okay, so again, we love Data Porter. You can use Data Porter to work with your statuses, to update those statuses to inactive or set them as discontinued, whichever it may be. It's really a nice feature. And actually, another thing I don't have on our slide deck, but I wanted to bring up is 2 new features in version 2019 or V8, however you look at that, on setup buyers and setup reason codes. I don't know if you guys remember these drop-down lists, but they had, especially like buyers, if you go through the list and you have a long list of buyers and maybe people are no longer with the company anymore and you can't delete them. So in version 2019, they've added an active flag. So if a buyer is no longer with the company, you can set them as inactive or remove the checkbox, and that removes that name or the buyer from the drop-down list, because that list, if it's really long and you have to start scrolling through it, it's not fun to find the right one. And that's the same with the reason codes. So with reason codes, you know, they just never go away, but now you know you can hide the reason codes that you no longer use. So nice little feature in the new version. And that's pretty much all we had on that slide. And then I'll send that back over to Becky to talk about purging.
Yep, and I like the last one, your slide there about training on filters. So if you inactivate customers, you have to teach users how to do their customer lookups where they don't see inactive customers, or the sales orders where they don't see, just automatically set their sales orders to not see anything that's older than 6 months. Different ways they can do that. Anyhow, so that was pruning what people look at. Then there is the pruning true purging. Is the size of my database getting unwieldy? Now I don't know our participants how big how big they can get as far as database size. And we have customers who have 100 gig databases, and the system still functions, but it gets harder to move around, harder to back up, harder to, restore test databases. And so there are reasons to actually get rid of data. In the front end, there are purges. You can actually go into like the sales order area or the purchase order area and tell it to purge items that are over X number of months old, 60 months, 90 months. You have to have settings, give people access to do it. And things like purchase orders and sales orders, if it's a couple of years old, this isn't financial data, and if it's become anything real financially, you have an invoice or a voucher. So the need to keep around purchase orders, sales orders that are very old, usually isn't that high. Manufacturing, you can do completed work orders. A lot of people purge those even after just a few months. It's internal, it doesn't mean a lot. And then there are other, under System Manager, there's an activity log area where you can run purges of various general system things. And I can't get into it too deep in this, but excuse me. We also work with customers to do other cleanups. One thing is that you should, not for size, but for security, you really should remove inactive users, maybe not immediately, but within a reasonable period of time. Immediately set them to no access, but then when you're pretty sure they're not coming back, you delete them from SQL. You can delete inactive companies, demo companies. You can also set, in current ones, you can set the color on companies so they show up a little differently. And we can also go in and clean out specific tables with you. The last one on the list, WRK tables, that's short short speak for work tables. One of the things that happens is that when you're running a report like an aging, it doesn't put the data directly into the report. It puts it into a work table, a special table where it collects it all up, gets it processed back in SQL, and then sends a nice short list out to the report. Well, what happens is something like purchase orders. Somebody goes to print a purchase order, realize they didn't put a filter on. They're printing 20,000 purchase orders. Oh my gosh, kill the process. Depending on where they hit it, you can end up with 20,000 purchase orders in that work table, which makes it run slower the next time and then slower the next time. And you can build these work tables, you probably want scripts out there because they build up to the point that, if somebody goes in to run purchase orders and it doesn't even seem like it's responding after that's happened. Because those little records stay out there, the system doesn't understand, okay, reporting's done, get rid of it. So work tables is a good cleanup. There's something called TCI DB activity log. This is a log that keeps track of anybody making changes in the tables that isn't doing it from the Sage 500 application. And a lot of times this is perfectly legitimate because you may have a website that feeds sales orders in. If you don't set things up right every time a sales order comes in, it puts a record out there. And more records and more records. And if you don't have it set up to make sure that doesn't happen, I've seen this table have 100 million records in it. So it's getting huge when there is really nothing useful in there. So we can help you with that. Pick list table. Even if you don't want to get rid of your sales orders and shipments, you can set things up so pick lists go away after, say, 3 months. Doesn't change the fact that you've got the shipment or the fact that you've got the sales order or the invoice. It just means you can't reprint the pick list. Don't need to reprint the pick list at that point. So there are lots of other areas and ways besides the full purge. We do have users who do full purges. Usually it's the ones that are in the 100 gigabyte database size, with a couple hundred users. Most people, full purge is probably not worth it. So anyhow, so those are some things to help with cleanups. It's nice to think about year-end cleanups. And now on to menus and Jen.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the menu upgrade utility. If you've recently done an upgrade to your Sage 500, you'll want to make sure that you have access to those new tasks and features. You can always go in and manually add them to your menu, but this little utility is not really widely known. It's actually buried in this, this long link here. It's with your client software under the managed applications, and it allows you to log into that and move tasks that are not on the menu onto your custom menu. It doesn't give any additional access to that. That'll still need to be done through security, but this is a great way to just see if you're missing any tasks or new BIE views that have been released with the version. And then Becky's going to talk about users' roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and we'll keep it pretty brief because we want to, have a couple minutes here to open up the lines. But it's just kind of a reminder that you really should review your user security now and then. Admittedly, it's kind of a painful process because Sage 500 manages everything at such a granular level, gives it flexibility, but it also makes it more effort to manage. So you want to figure out, what users have access. I always push a lot of, give them a lot of display, but not necessarily ability to change. I mean, a lot of people are going to be able to see a customer, but maybe only a few of them are going to want to actually be able to change customers. And the Explorer views very open, other than like, GL area and things like that. And there are reports, but they're pretty junky. A lot of the stuff was written, obviously if I've worked with this for 20 years, it's older than 20 years. They were written when people didn't worry as much about security as they do now. So one of the things we've done, ended up with pretty much a package set, so we can send it out for everybody pretty cheap. If you want to check with RKL support, is we have built Explorers, a set of them, so you can go out and do something simple like just a list of users and security groups, or look at a specific area. I've gone in on this Explorer by user, by task, and actually by company. We're going to go find out exactly what access they have, which means you can do it the other way too. Unlike the report, I can go straight in here. I can say, I want to know who has user group maintenance and has either normal or supervisory access. I.e., we've just had a panic call. We want to know, our auditors are asking us, how can, it's auditor time. Yes, those folks are coming in. Who can go in and change permissions? Well, here's a real quick look. Came up with the task name or something close to it, and boom, I have 4 people who have access to change security rights: admin, Dim2, and Jennifer Pitt. We change that task to contains, how about reprint, as in reprint checks. Try the reprint. That should be enough. You can do kind of a guess and find out. Okay, I didn't get checks, or did I? But you can see exactly who has reprint checklist and things. So if you're going through auditors doing security checks and things, we have better tools, and we can get them out there for you pretty cheap because we've already built them. So anyhow, that was kind of, we're at 5 minutes, and I'd like to be able to open up just in case anybody has any questions.
It looks like a question came in. Are there consequences for sending a 1099 to a vendor you paid with a credit card?
There are no consequences with the IRS. There is only irritated vendors if they end up getting the same information reported twice. So it's not, the IRS is not going to come fine you $50 for that. Thanks for joining in, and thank you for being RKL customers.